Okay, so here we are in section 5.8, and this section is all about writing your own value returning functions. Don't forget we have this video here from the author, so you can refer to this and watch this video as well. So the link is available in Canvas or also right here from this slide. Okay, so with a value returning function, we're going to be introduced to this wonderful, amazing keyword right here, return. Okay, so this is something that we're going to use if we're in a function and we need to get a value out of that function and back into whichever function it was called from, whether it was main or another function. And so we're just going to set it up this way. So return, and then whatever the expression might be. Typically, we'll be using a variable name, and so we'll have a variable here. But it can be, as you can see down here, like a sum of two variables, the result of another value returning function. So lots of different ways that we can use return, and we're going to look at a few. Okay, so why are they useful? Well, because we can do little things like this. So let's say we use a function to prompt for user input, and then so we're just going to return that input. And maybe we wanted to do to help us simplify some math expressions. There are maybe you have complex calculations that need to be repeated throughout the program. So if we're doing something, it doesn't even have to be complex. It could be really kind of anything. So maybe it's just a sales tax function where we want to figure out what sales tax would be. So we can have that and just be able to call it at any point and get that value returned back. So it's nice. It's really nice to have this. And you're going to want to use the return value by assigning it to a variable is typically how we'll do it. Can be used as an argument in another function too, but you'll see kind of set up as a variable return for the most part for what we're doing here now, at least at the beginning. Okay, so let's take a look at some code because we're just looking at all sorts of text there. Okay, so take a look at this particular piece of this code, and we'll look at the whole program in a second. The name of this function is sum. The parameters that we're looking at here are num1, num2, so we've got the values coming in, and we're creating a new variable name here called result. And for that result variable, we are going to add up num1 and num2, which was received from someplace else, right? So, and then here we go with return result. All we're doing, here's our keyword return, and we're returning result. And there we go right there, okay? And it's going to return the value from this. Now we could also just say return num1 plus num2, all right? But, typically we'll see it written like this because you'll have all sorts of other things that you may be doing in a function. But if it's something really simple, you may just return it that way. All right, so there's that option. So let's take a look at this code here. All right, so here we go. Here's the piece of the code that we just looked at right here. And so really quickly in main, we're asking for first age, second age. Here's our total here, and then we've got sum, and then here we're sending in first age and second age. Rolling down here, coming in. So first age comes to num1, second age goes to num2, and here's where this is added up, and then it returns that back here. So this basically is saying total equals num1 plus num2, or total equals result. This is really what this is saying here. This piece right here is coming back in this return as result that was calculated here and here coming from first stage, second age. Okay, so let's take a look at that and we'll kind of walk through it real quick. So as I hit next, it's just going to come down through. We're going to call main, and here we go. So first stage, if we put this in here, so I guess I'm 48 right now. Almost 49. I'll say 50. Okay, and so here we go. First age, second age. Here is my call. So here's my sum call. So you'll see this drop down when I hit next. Drops down, and you see num1 becomes first age, num2 becomes second age. There we go. And then hit next again. Here comes results. Adding those up. And we are now returning results. So now when I hit next, here's a return value. Now, typically when we've been running these through in Python Tutor with our void functions, return value would say none or null. So we've got 98 here listed as our return, and so we're gonna send that baby back in there. So when I click on next, boom, here we go. Notice how in the main function, total is now equal to 98. That was done on line 12. calling sum, sending it down here, and running through here. So now it's just going to simply print that last line and good to go. Okay, so that's one way of doing it. Now, what I was mentioning before is, and typically this is the way you want to do it right now. I think it helps you keep it nice and clean. But if we wanted to change this up, we could. I could get rid of this, and I could just take this, and I'm gonna cut that baby out of there, and I could do this instead. All right, and it would give me the same result. So if I just walk through it real quick, next. I have to input my age, so I'll just do the same numbers again, I guess. It doesn't really matter, but anyway, so I've got that on there. And then now as I walk through, you'll see that's called my return value of 98. Same thing. I just said return, and I want you to add those up and send that back. And so total, which is right here, total equals that. So total equals 98. So it can be done either way. I'd suggest for now, use a variable down here and return the variable. But as you get used to this, you'll start, just like with anything else that you've been learning along the way, the other tools you've been learning, you learn how to simplify things, make it easier, and all that kind of good stuff. Okay, so that's just a really quick look into this. And so let's go ahead and go back and we'll look at some more stuff. All right, so before we go any further, I wanted to point out IPO charts. And so you'll see that kind of next in the slideshow. So input, processing, output. And this chart is used sort of like a flow chart. You kind of use it instead of a flow chart, but it's typically set up to help you lay out your functions and talk about what's going to be an input, what it's going to do is processing, and then an output. So um, let's take a look at how, I'll give you a couple of examples in here. So when you look at this is just actually from our book, and you can see some different things in here. And it sorts out, so let's take a look at this discount function. So an input for this discount function would typically be an item's regular price. And this gives you an idea of the processing. So what is it going to do? Well, it's going to calculate item's discount, blah, 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 tells you how, right? Even gives a variable name here. So if you want to list that kind of stuff out. So we're using this global constant. And a lot of times I'll see if people are going to use certain variables, they'll put them in here and actually list the variable names. And then you have an output is just the item's discount. So it's just one way of doing it. I know some people really like using flowcharts, and they kind of more frightened into using IPO charts. So you'll see a few of these in the book, and so that's sort of what they're set up to do. Okay, but let's take a look at some more functions and some more code because I want to show you some other things. And one of the things that I want to show you is with the string and returning strings. And this is a program we looked at the beginning of the chapter. And you notice how I said fix this program because we have a little bit of an error here. So I'm going to go ahead and go over to this particular code. And let's take a look at this. Okay, so remember when we ran this before, we were in main. We run the getName function. It goes down to getName and it says, okay, here's my variable name. Okay, what is your name? So you enter it and then it goes back. It's over and it's going to print name. This causes an error because it can't find it, right? So let me run through this real quick. And I'm going to put this in here. So name is stored, but we have no return value. So when I hit next, it comes up here and now it can't find what this is. So you see it down here, name is not defined. So see if you can fix this really quickly. All right, I'm just gonna pause the video, or you pause the video, and then hit play again after you've had a chance to go to this link and then try and fix the code. Okay, so let's take a look. Hopefully you've had a chance to walk through and fix this. But if you haven't or you had any kind of issues, let me show you a couple things that you can do here. So I'm gonna go back to edit this code. And we saw just a second ago using return. So let's say I come down here on line 9 and I just simply say return name. Okay, so now I'm going to return name and it's going to go back into the main function where this was called under get name. And let's see if this works. And you'll find that it doesn't, but let's walk through it anyway because it's a very common error that I'll see and people get stuck on this one. So here's what I want to show you. Okay, so I'm going to walk through this again. We're doing the same thing. And we're going to walk through to get to the call. And here we go. So I'm down here on name, input my name. So I'll put that baby in there. And here we go, get name. Now notice when I hit next, we're on the return name line right here. I'm going to hit next. Return value is indeed a string with the value chef. So great. So I'm returning that. When I click next though, I come back in here and here I'm in main. You see name is not defined anymore. So I'm going to hit next again and what happens? Oh look, boom. Name is not defined. This is a very common error with trying to get a returning function to work. Okay, so watch this. If I go back to edit this code, and some of you may have seen this as you were trying to fix it. So you got the return part down. We just went over that. So return, great. But remember, as we come up here to line 4, or I'm sorry, line 3, where this is called, you have to have a place for it to return. So in other words, I have to give it a variable name location to be stored. So I want to say name equals, and I'm going to use get name. Now we're using the same variable name here, but it can be different things. So now I have a place for this to be stored. So this is the way that this would be fixed. So I can say name now equals, and here's my call get name. So now when it returns, it's going to send this back in. So this statement here is essentially saying name equals whatever this name is down here, this input down here. Okay, and this could be a different thing. So if this was a different variable name, it doesn't make any difference at all. So we could call this, I don't know, name 45. I have no idea. Just name and the same thing. So name 45 here makes no difference. Okay, so we're just returning the value that we're storing here in name 45. We're returning this value up here to this variable name. Okay, so and the same thing here. We can call this whatever we want. Doesn't make any difference at all. Well, following, of course, variable naming rules, right? So I can't say print right here or any other reserved word. But anyway, so we've got this piece here, and I'm saying I want this to equal this. Now this will cause me an error. I'd have to copy this little junk down into here. But anyway, you get the idea. Okay, so you have to have a place for your call to return something. So this function needs to send this back to someplace to be stored in order to use it again, and that's why we have to have that there. Okay, so that's one thing. So let's take a look at a couple other little things, and I'm gonna roll back over here real quickly, and let's look at Boolean values. So when we use a bool, we're talking about true or false, and usually you'll see this when you're testing a condition, like whether a number is even. That's kind of a common one, although we use mod a lot for that. But we'll take this code next here, and let's take a look at it really quickly. We're just returning true or false, and we want to use that value. So if we look at this code, we have at the very top, we're taking a number, an integer, and we're saying enter a number, and then here's a call for us. So is even is a function. We're sending in this number. So there we go, number comes down here, and here's our parameter variable here, and then it's going to walk through here. So it's going to determine whether the number is even. If it is, set the status to true, otherwise set it to false. So here we go. So if the number, and remember our mod here has to deal with remainders, equals 0, then the status is true. So this is saying if it's even by divided by 2, uh, or mod by 2, I guess, to look for the remainder. But anyway, we're saying, okay, this is true. Otherwise, it's false. So, and then we're going to return the status. So the status would either be true or false, depending on the if statement. Okay. So you're probably not going to use this a ton, but if you want to play with it a little bit, go for it. Something that you might use a little bit more, and this is the last part, hang with me here. I know this is a little bit lengthy one here, but there's a lot to cover in this one. This is a really important section. Uh, the last little piece in this section is returning multiple values. So you send stuff into a function, you need to get more than one thing out. Okay, and there are a couple of key things here. You're going to separate your returns by a comma, so not really that big a deal. You've done things like that before, so we put a comma in there. But the really funky thing is when we're talking about having a place for uh, you know, a return, a place for it to be stored, you need to have that an extra one if we're just doing 2 on the left side of the assignment operator. So it's a little bit funky. So let's just go ahead and take a look at it because I think it's easier to see. Okay, so we're looking at this. We've got this function called getName. And in the function getName, we are asking for first and last name. So here we go, first name, last name. That's it, right? And we're just using first and last. And then we're going to return first and last. So notice separated by comma, we can have 2 things going back or more. We just put another comma here if we had something else. Okay, but we're just doing 2. The space doesn't matter. So we've got first and last. We're returning those, but notice in the function call down here where it says get name. Okay, so this is where the call is. It's going out saying, hey, I want you to do this. Now this is saying, I want you to return it. Notice how we have two variable names here. So this is a little bit funky. We haven't done this before. So you have to have two variable names for it to be able to return two things. If you had three things, maybe you had middle name in here, you'd have to have three variable names down here too. Okay, so and it puts them in order. Okay, so this becomes this becomes this. If we type this in and said return last comma first, last would still go to first name, first then would still go to last name. So you've got to make sure you do them in the right order. Okay, it's just going to do one for one each time. All right, and then what this will do is essentially what this will do is this is going to now assign. It's going to store first name is going to have the value stored with first here, whatever was input. Last name will store the value of last, which was input here. Okay, so two places to store for two returns. And again, it's on the left side of the equal sign, the assignment operator. All right, so that's a lot. It's been about 15 minutes, so I know that's a lot. You have to go back and look at a couple sections here. Hopefully you're able to pause and play with the code and mess around along the way. This is really, really important for you to be able to understand value returning functions and how to use return. Very important. So have fun playing with this stuff.